Hello, hello. The day is almost over. We have two more presentations. So I want to introduce Jake Butler. I personally know Jake. He's a personal friend of mine from my time at Parkview. He's an IS manager over enterprise system management and the data centers. Jake is extremely active in the local Fort Wayne IT security. If you're in IT security in Fort Wayne, you've probably ran across Jake one way or the other, either in the InfraGard Indiana Members Alliance, as well as a co-chair for the Indiana Executive Council on Cybersecurity. Again, I'm a personal friend of Jake. I'm very excited to introduce him, and thanks a lot.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm here to take the next, it's a joke, we're going to take 30 minutes, it's supposed to be. We're going to do it as fast as possible. So I'm going to start off with, as Matt Cohey said, I am the co-chair for IECC. We're a government agency based out of Indianapolis. We'll talk more about them for a little bit. I'm also on the board of directors for InfraGard, where we collectively protect the 16 critical infrastructures for Indiana. There's 15 since we don't have any nuclear. But so yeah, that's me in a nutshell. InfraGard, we're a collaboration with the private sector and the FBI, so we feed information to them. They do their best to feed information to us, but it's the feds. They don't like to share information. But we're on the board of directors there, and they're a great partnership with us. We do lots of conferences with them, and we do debriefs with them all the time and get to go to the Indy office. It's kind of fun, kind of scary. IECC is a public-private sector organization that's booted up by Governor Holcomb. Actually started with Governor Pence. We're looking to build security for Indiana. One of the big things that we have accomplished with them is that we do have some new laws and regulations coming into play. This is how we are structured. So we have all of our working groups that we do for the IECC to support all of our pillars for the Indiana critical infrastructure. And part of all of that is IECC. So we have lots of resources at hand. We can call up National Guard, things like that for incident responding. But it's kind of a good thing to do, especially as we start broadening our security focus in Indiana. Our big accomplishments for both organizations, the biggest one is CritX. In 2018, we sat down and we physically attacked a wastewater environment down at a Muscatatuck base. They have 2 water plants that we could then infiltrate and do that. That then sprungboard into a tabletop exercise here in Fort Wayne with our wastewater environment of City of Fort Wayne to discuss what it would take and what it would look like for an attack, and then the implications downstream into the healthcare space. What is the hospitals going to do if they're without water? We don't typically think about that because it's part of the critical infrastructures, but we sat down to the tabletop exercise, and that was really interesting to get through, to say the least. It was always, when do we divert patients? Who do we divert patients to? And in the area, how does that going to look for Parkview, Lutheran? We even had the VA hospital involved. So some big key players and points in there. One of the other big things that we have coming out was the cyber reporting law, the HEA 1169, where entities have to report cyber events to the State House in order to get the information shared out and help protect Indiana critical infrastructure. So in the beginning, 2014 was a great year. Let's see here. I became a dad for the first time. 3.9 million Hoosiers lost their patient information. Small. And Parkview decided it was time to set up a focus team for security. Now, the breach was not from Parkview, so don't associate that. That's my disclaimer. And my kid didn't do it either, so we're good there. But we decided we needed to have a team dedicated and focused to cybersecurity because, frankly, the network team was the one who held security, and it was ad hoc. It was just me, focused on security. We had a whole team of it, but we just really needed somebody dedicated and focused. So 2014, we decided to start the cyber SecOps team, is what it actually began as. And we wanted to find a form, a tool that we could leverage in order to drive our focus in security. Because from a Parkview perspective, what we did in security before 2014 was great. It was what we did. It was HIPAA regulations. It was compliance regulations. But that wasn't going to be enough as we start leveraging and start moving into now what is today's cyber footprint, APTs, all kinds of fun jazz. So we sat down and I met with lots of people, compliance, legal, head VPs in the organization to understand our business needs, business requirements, and then package that all up in a cute little tool and help drive the focus of cybersecurity for Parkview. That's where we got into the CISSP, the Cybersecurity Framework by NIST. We started playing with that, started looking at how that tool we could leverage. And our first iteration of that was their 1.0 version. And I did a crosswalk for HIPAA compliance and SANS operations, SANS Top 20, just to see what that would look like. And it shed on a lot of light to our organization. One of those pieces was, like I said, what we did in security, we did well, but there was a lot of delinquencies elsewhere. So we did in 2016, we used the CSF to manage and maintain all of our audits, both for HIPAA and for PCI. PCI was the last one that I crosswalked for us into that environment, but we started then building out some of the other audits, things that we do, such as our Most Wired is just a healthcare industry award that we win or have won. And, I use that CSF to crosswalk into that. So it's very versatile, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But, we continue to update our procedures, our policies around where we were delinquent and what we needed to do to get moving forward. We even use the framework to buy specific tools to cover specific areas. So, we were good at firewalls. We did those day in and day out. Those were norms, but we didn't have things to look at identification of equipment on our stuff, on our environment. Our medical devices were unbeknownst to us. So we leveraged the tools in order to pick up other tools to make those buying decisions. 2018 to current, the team still leverages it in the back end. They still use quite a bit of it. We've expanded it into some of the JCO information and JCO regulations for our hospital organization. We've upgraded PCI from its previous version to what's now the current one. And they're looking to actually expand into high trust and see what it's going to take to get that. And leveraging the cybersecurity framework is going to be key for that to help draw that all forward and help map that across for everybody. So I keep talking about it. Let's get into what the NIST cybersecurity framework really is, other than something I would really like to talk about. But its overview is it's really just a framework, and that framework is structured and flexible enough that you can set it up with any other regulations that you need to adhere to in your organization, be it HIPAA, be it PCI, be it ISO or SOC 2, even high trust. But it's just flexible, and you can manipulate it in such a way that it really works out to the best advantage. The goals for the framework is that it does provide a common language for all of those regulations, because where high trust may say one thing, SOC may say it differently. And the framework drives that common language as you look at how that gets crosswalked into the environment. So it's also risk-based, so it allows you to find better risks, more areas that really need to be looked at versus areas that you're doing really good in, but you don't need to look so hard at it. And, as everything in cybersecurity, it's a living document, so you always have to keep up on it, maintain it, especially as your organization changes and you bring out new products, deprecate old products, or deprecate new products in some of our cases I've done. But it is a tool that can be leveraged by all of our public sectors, private sectors, academia, any organization, large or small. It can be leveraged and it's easily adaptable. So the framework in and of itself is comprised of 6 functions. Those functions are broken down into categories and then subcategories further, and they're really just groupings of activity that you need to do for each of those areas. So in identity, the biggest thing we need to do is find something on the network or find something in our environment, right? So identity is all about what are those assets, where's the risk, where's the business need, what is the business need, and how those groupings really apply to that specific area. Then we move into protect. Protecting is the next piece of the framework. It's also the next step. Once we know what's there, we can start protecting. We can start looking at it. We can start poking at it with a dull stick or a sharp one to find out where it's vulnerable at, what we need to do in order to make sure that it is protected, and all of those policies fall into that area. Once we can protect it, we can also start detecting it, and that's also key because you got to see what you're protecting. And going through that allows you to make sure that that if there is an incident, you can detect it, find it, and then move into the responding phase and being able to stop the incident where it sits. Don't want it to expand across the network, and so all of your policies and activities come out of your responding phase there. And then, of course, there's always the cleanup, which I'm sure everybody is really good at, is cleaning up, right? So all of the activities in cleanup here and recovery is just to make sure you can get the impaired system back online and get it back online effectively and efficiently, along with removing the bad actors and bad juju in there. So in the category space, there are 6 core values, 6 core functions, 26 categories under all of those functions, and 109 subcategories across the entire framework. And they're all closely linked together. So we've got, access management, access control, detection process. Those are just some key ones out of the identification space. So don't worry, that's not all of them. And then they're divided into subcategories to help give that activity a real good measure for the organization to be able to step through, and how do you map into or look at the space in the environment to say, hey, this is really what they're talking about. Whereas like HIPAA is like, you should check the password. That's 8 characters or more. This one actually says you need to do this. The next big portion of the framework is the maturity model. So they do tiers 1 through 4. Parkview, we did 5 just to add some good measure and make sure that we could be different a little bit. But we really sat down and started looking at of those categories, of those subcategories, where did we fall into that tiering space from 1 to 4? And is it the ostrich in the sand? Man, he's having a good time. He doesn't see anything about what's going on in his network or anything like that. So, what of those categories and subcategories are tier 1? And we really need to start pulling our head out of the sand and getting into tier 2, which is all about your policies, your procedures, your processes. Are they defined? In tier 2, they need to be defined. May not be accepted across the organization. Like I can define a policy that says you must have 10 characters, but if the organization says, no, we only need 8, then we need to get more organizational involvement to get past tier 2. Then we move into tier 3, where we have a significant amount of work. So from an organization perspective, we have all of our policies and procedures in place. We have lots of activity going around it. We have a good measure as to what's going on in our environment, and we can be able to report appropriately when necessary. And then, get you into tier 4. We actually start looking at how to start looking at a plan, do, check, act, be able to, look at our current activities, look at our past activities, and adjust our activities accordingly, and being agile and flexible as possible within our environment to be able to move into a cyber holistic environment. Organizationally, top down, everybody is aware of cybersecurity. They're following it, and everybody is making sure they adhere to what those policies and procedures are that we've put forth. Then comes the fun part, and this was actually a lot of research that I had to do for Parkview, was the information references. This is where we take the NIST framework and we marry it with the organizational needs of what we want to do. So from a healthcare perspective, we tied that in with HIPAA. We tied that in with OCR. We tied in PCI DSS because we were starting to approach merchant number 2 in our processes. So we need to start looking at PCI DSS more seriously. But that whole crosswalk then becomes that common language. So we can see that, if it's a IDAM1, so identification access management, subcategory 1, what does that look like for the SANS? What does that look like for PCI DSS? What is that control really stating for all of those? It becomes a common language and a common ground for all of those regulations. So we can see, this is an example of one that we picked up. So I was talking about identification function, it's category access management, IDAM1, it's reference. So these are the 2 reference controls that we could quickly pull for what this whole measure is all about. So if we were spot on for number 4 here from a maturity level, we've covered those controls. This control for governance, it'd be all of 853, because this governance one is all about processes, or all about policies rather, excuse me. And that's really what sets 853 of the NIST standard in place. Same thing with your NIST 853 and the, it's for AC. Inside of NIST 53 has AC2, so. But you can see how quickly filling out all of our 109 subcategories, this column gets pretty lengthy. Excel is huge. The Excel workbook I worked off was huge. In fact, I know I had some help. We had to rewrite a couple of Visual Basic scripts in the back end. So my Excel doc always asks to enable macros, and I say yes. I love it. But we did have to write macros for the back end to help reference a lot of the tables. So before the implementation of our CSF at Parkview, like I said, what we did in security, we did well. We followed our HIPAA boxes. We checked those other boxes for best practices, but it was all ad hoc. It was a lot of, you do your thing, I'll do my thing. We'll talk in the hallway about something, and we get really nowhere with it. So this helped us drive focus, drive formality, and be able to give everybody a springboard and a measure to say, hey, here's what we're doing, now let's do it better. And we, I know I did, and I know there's quite a few people at Parkview that every time we had an audit come up, it was dreaded. It was like, oh man, we got to pull all of this stuff, all of this information. Well, after the CSF, we had all that stuff in place. We could take those audits, and instead of sitting down with the auditors for months going, what do you need now? What do you need now? It's like a genie in a bottle. They rub it and we're like, poof, what do you need? we could now sit down and go, hey, this is where we're at in our framework. This is what we've accomplished and what we've done to make things better. It also became a single point of documentation for us. So we were able to say, hey, here's all of the framework stuff, and here's our leading documentation for the framework, and keep track of it from our policies, our procedures, our operations, even the random Visio diagrams that we had built for networking things. So it all became so much easier to find, to track, and to make sure we could get those audits a lot faster. Because I don't know about your guys' organizations, every other week is an audit, right? And if it's not one audit, it's, you know, something else. So, you know, like our HIPAA audits come in and, oh, we turn around and now it's JACO. And for hospitals, if you're not aware, JACO has to not go to one organization, but they go to all of our hospitals. So it's a month-long process and everybody has to go. So it's a fun time if you've never been through one. I recommend it. Right. So, you know, within the application space of what we were doing, we, like I said, leveraged the CSF in order to give us a good crosswalk and a good understanding of what we needed, what we had to do to improve our security and to improve our environments. And then we started following the Plan, Do, Check, Act. So once we get through it, yeah, we go back and double check. We go back through and make sure that we're in alignment. We did say what we meant to say. And we are, you know, doing what we're saying we're doing, really is what it comes down to. Because at some point in time, the last thing I wanted to do is pass all these audits with flying colors and then get a breach and OCR going, well, you didn't really do this. And then that's a bad day. It's a lot of fines and a lot of money. So, all right. I love this slide because this means I'm done. Do we have any questions, guys?
Someone were to want to get involved in InfraGard, how would they go about that?
Yes, InfraGard, we are always looking for active new members. In Indiana, we have a chapter. Our chapter is 124-ish people. So if you want to get involved, you can see me, or you can also go to infragard.org, and they will, that's posted by the FBI. They will do a background check and get you in touch with the local chapter, but you can also go to secureindiana.org, which is the InfraGard chapter for Indiana website, and check them out there. Yes.
Yeah, so InfraGard protects all 16 critical infrastructures, and so this is a great solution to do in healthcare, because you crosswalk the regulations governing healthcare. How receptive are other organizations? You work for a particular organization in healthcare, right?
Yes.
So is this being shared through InfraGard across the healthcare ISAC, or however you share this information? And or has anybody thought about or done anything about expanding the crosswalking to other areas of critical infrastructure?
So he's asking about sharing information, specifically around the CSF. We have shared the CSF from InfraGard and from IECC. In fact, IECC is the primary driver of the use of CSF. They leverage it within within that organization as well, and throughout the state of Indiana government side. So they just adopted it into our space. As far as sharing some of those crosswalk measures, NIST in and of itself is where the resource is. They have lots of crosswalks already out there, which I think they follow all of the NIST standards, of course, because they're like that. They also have SOX, or no, not SOX, sorry, ISO 2700 applications out there as well, crosswalked. So NIST has already done quite a few of those for us. But there are also other resources out there that have specific crosswalks to it as well. So those resources are out there. But if you wanted, from information sharing from our side, we haven't sent anything through the MSISAC or the Indiana ISAC, just because the data itself would probably be a little too large for sharing of that nature. But Indiana, or so IoT.gov/cybersecurity, they do have a lot of references out there for the critical infrastructures.
I'm speaking from the state of Michigan, the Michigan Cybersecurity Corps. So we look often at state and local governments and what they need to do to prepare. And you also talked about some legislation.
Yes.
That did happen, will happen. Can you elaborate?
So it did happen. It's passed for Indiana, and it's supposed to go into legislative actions on July 1st, I believe, for us. And so what that is if there is an incident or a breach, you can fill out contact information and specific IOCs, and that'll go into the Indiana Department of Homeland Security Information Technology Office, where they will cycle through it and get the contact and get the help out if needed, as well as share some of those IOCs out there. Yes, sir.
When you were talking about the maturity levels, is that overall for an organization, or are you saying different sections could be in different maturity?
Different categories and subcategories can be in different maturity models. So like I said, what we do from a Parkview perspective, what we do well, we did well. If one of the measures lined up with HIPAA, man, we were spot on with a 3. But if it was something outside of HIPAA, yeah, it was 1, 2, 1.5, hence that 5th number.
And if you're judging the overall maturity of the organization, would it be the average of that, or would you just call it the lowest? So if you have one that's tier 1, are you now tier 1 as a company, or is it we mostly have 2s and 3s, so we're probably closer to a 3?
You wouldn't average it over the whole thing. You would maybe average it to the functions, like for access or for identity, we're at a 2. But you would really just follow those categories and subcategories to look at in order to make sure you're maintaining your maturity. So from my experience and what I was going through with it, we had areas that were level 1, but areas that were level 3, and we didn't need to focus hard on the level 3s anymore because we were there. We just needed to maintain those and then build up on the level 1s and level 2s. And so that's really how we drove that factor. So we paid attention to all of them, all 109 of them. All right, any others? They gave me a cool laser pointer too. I didn't get to use it enough. All right, thanks guys.